this stuff in the ribbon up top. Now we're going to go into the general options for the added items. So in the general options, we've got the general options here, the number format, and then you have these little triangles for the toggle, number format, show non-zero or active, header, and then the footer. Let's go into each of these. So in the number format, we've got divide by 1,000. Now, if you're a small business, you might not need to do that, but if you're a business that has like millions in dollar amounts, then you might divide by 1,000, removing some of the zeros. Remembering the general idea here being that we want to report something that's going to help us with decision-making processes. And if we're talking about millions of dollars, then the 5 here representing 500 might not be that relevant to us. It's a rounding difference in essence for big decision making. Therefore, we could say divide it by 1,000 and it removes that. So this is going to be 1.56 that we can multiply times 1,000 to get to the actual number, a little bit cleaner and easier to see if we're talking about big numbers. Let's remove that one. Don't show zero amounts. Now, there's kind of an issue with the zeros that are going to be in place because you might, for example, want to see the zeros to see all of the accounts and or to see activity in active accounts. Now, you can see down here that, so if, let me uncheck this, for example. So now we can basically see these zero amounts here. Now, for external reporting purposes, let me do it on just 1 year. Let's go from 0101 to 013124 to get a better idea of this. So December through, okay. And now we've got a bunch of zeros. Actually, I want to go through the end of the year. Let's do 123124. Like, what happened here? So, okay, so now it's showing zero amounts. For example, here we have a zero amount. Here's a zero amount. Now, normally you wouldn't want those for external reporting purposes because there's no activity in them. But for internal reporting, you might want to see all of the accounts that are impacted. And if there is something going on within that account, you might want to drill down on it. For example, clicking on it to give you the transaction detailed information. So if you're talking in particular about like clearing accounts, like undeposited funds, it's likely that they're going to be zero, but there might have been activity in that account during that time frame. Therefore, for internal reporting purposes, we might want to see those zeros so I can drill down on them and look at the detail and the GL activity within them that has happened, even though it has a zero balance. Let's go back in here. And let's go back. The default was to don't show round amounts to the nearest whole currency amount. So this is basically removing the pennies. Now, it used to say remove cents, but notice this is a little bit more specific because if I round this, you can see the pennies will be taken off. So that's going to make it a little bit cleaner to look at. Once again, for external reporting, even for internal reporting, that might be a little bit nicer on the eyes. One reason I think they changed it from like removing cents is that if you had, for example, I'm going to uncheck that. If you had the divide by 1,000 on, notice that now it's giving you a decimal, but that decimal doesn't represent pennies, right? It's going to be representing the decimal place after you divide by 1,000, right? So that means that this rounding number will take off. It'll go to the nearest like whole number after dividing over here. So it's possible that you want to divide by 1,000, keep the decimal in place, or possibly divide by 1,000 and remove the decimal, or you don't divide by 1,000, in which case this one will remove the pennies. All right, what else we got? We've got the negative numbers being represented with a negative. So I don't think we have any negative numbers here. Sometimes there's one, so you might have a negative number, for example, on the balance sheet if there was like a contra asset account, typically depreciation or accumulated depreciation. So we can represent that with a negative in there, or we can represent it with a negative behind it, which isn't normal in the United States, but might be more custom in other areas. I kind of like to have the brackets around it so that if you had a negative number like accumulated depreciation in the asset area, it's going to show that negative with brackets around it. And you can also show in red. So if you had a negative number, now it's going to be a red number with brackets to kind of emphasize more detail on that negative. So to me, the brackets might be the red might be a little bit of an overkill, although that could be useful, particularly if you're talking like at an income statement or performance report. Let's do the same thing here just to get an idea. Let's switch this one and let's go to this item and say we want to show negative numbers with brackets and make it red. So now you can clearly, distinctly see that negative number here. That also might be useful, of course, when you're looking at a comparative type of report that we looked at before. So you might say that we want to compare this to like the previous year. Let's say this is going to be compare to the previous year, but there is no previous year. Let's go from 2025 to 12/31/25, and then we have a previous year, and then we could say take a look at the dollar change, and notice that's going to give us substantial negative numbers that might stand out a bit more if we make them red. And I kind of like the brackets as opposed to just a negative personally. All right, so that's going to be those ones, and then those are in the number formatting. Notice what we didn't have there was different font styles and whatnot, which you could get if you export to Excel and then do a little other touch-ups in terms of numbers and colors other than red for text as well as possible cells.